Welcome to Oasis, St. Luke's midweek service. My name is Deanna Heiss, and today we have both Doug Castle and Jeff Rowhlwing. This is our final segment for the 2021 Oasis season, and a lot has changed since this Oasis sort of alternative worship style service came to be about 4 years ago. We've been all virtual this year, and that was a hard transition to make. One of the things that we as the Oasis team, and we know that members enjoy, was sort of the reflective and intimate experience that we could provide when we were in person, and we weren't sure how that would translate online. Well, it does look a little different. We're really glad that we were able to still bring you a kind of an alternative to a Sunday worship experience, and you have been so patient, and through some prayer and experimenting and upgraded video equipment, here we are. So we will be back in the fall in some form. While this is our last new segment, you can always check out the other interviews online and on the St. Luke's app at any time. Welcome to Oasis. No matter who you are or where you come from, you are welcome here. Today we get to talk to Jeff Rowhlwing. I normally introduce people as a guest speaker, but since Jeff is the leader of this motley crew that we call the Oasis team, he feels less like a guest and really more like the guy we're pulling from behind the camera, behind the guitar, behind the piano, and asking him to have a chat with us today. In preparing for our conversation today, I came across a quote from Johann Sebastian Bach that even all these centuries later actually feels like a great launch for our visit with Jeff. The quote is this: "I play the notes as they are written, but it is God who makes the music." Welcome, Jeff.
Thanks.
So for friends and members who have been part of St. Luke's for a while, you are familiar with Jeff. He's a Sunday morning staple. But I never like to assume that everyone watching Oasis is a member or has been to St. Luke's. So for anyone watching who might not have had the chance to see you or get to meet you, give us a little context for who you are. Tell us where you grew up, who's in your family, and what your role is here at St. Luke's.
I grew up out in Colorado for most of my childhood, up in the mountains, a town called Vail, Colorado. My dad was a pastor up there. My mom owns a kitchen store. I have 3 siblings. Great place to grow up there in the mountains. I was outside most of my childhood. I moved here to Wisconsin about 12 years ago from Arizona. That's where my wife and I lived. And we have 3 daughters. We have a 15, a 12, and a 6-year-old. And you'll see the 6-year-old dancing in the aisles and on video at times too. All 3 just love music and love to dance. What was the other question that you asked?
Tell us about your role here on staff.
My role here, yes. I am the Director of Music and Worship and Technology here at St. Luke's. I was a part-time praise band director for the first 2 years that I was here at this church, about 12 years ago, and 8 years ago I took over the head job as the music director. So that's my role here. I do a lot of I direct the choir, the children's choirs, lead the Sunday morning worship, and then the praise band and the various bands that we play, and then also help with the technology of the sanctuary sound system and the worship videos and those kind of things.
So being the son of a pastor, you had exposure to probably a lot of the inner workings of a church and the different roles that people played. But it's unlikely, I'm guessing, that you started out saying, someday I want to be the director of music, worship, and technology at a church. So take us back. Tell us about childhood Jeff. Tell us what was important to you and where you saw yourself in the world, what you saw yourself doing, and how that sort of circled back and brought you to us.
My dad, it was a small church. It was his second career. He was a CPA for the first part of my childhood. And when I was entering third grade is when he finished seminary and got a call to start a church out in the Vail area. So it started with 5, 6 people. And my brother, who's 4 years older than me, at the time was in 7th grade, and he was forced to be the piano player for the church. And I hadn't yet been able to do any music yet, but when I reached an age where I could sing, probably 5th grade, my brother and I were the male part of the choir. We were the men's group. And just being a part of a small growing church, the family was thrust into doing everything to help as much as we could. Teaching Sunday school, VBS, especially for me, the music is what I really gravitated towards. When I was young, even before that, I remember listening to a tape. I don't know if it was a tape or even, I'm not sure what it was I was listening to, but it was a guy by the name of Don Francisco. He was a Christian artist, primarily popular mainly in the 70s. And the CD was a live, or the disco tape was a live concert of his, where it was just him and his guitar, and he would tell stories in between and play songs. And for some reason, I remember it the first time I heard it as just a little, 3 or 4-year-old, just being gravitated to that sound and what that was. And it just kind of stayed with me for a long time. My dad had a guitar, but he didn't play it much. Early on, I remember him playing at campfires, but then he put it in the closet and never touched it again. But I would take it out and open it up and just look at it. And I would touch it and strum it, and then I knew nothing about it, so I'd close it and put it away. And I would do that over and over as a kid. And finally, my senior year of high school, I had an extra free elective class, and I decided to take guitar. And so that was the first time I actually picked up a guitar and learned chords. And
a senior in high school?
Senior in high school,
wow.
Yeah, and just fell in love with it immediately and started just playing it any chance that I could get. All the while, that concept was in my head of what that means to share it, use it as a way to share your story. So my dad, as soon as I was able to hammer out a few chords, sure enough was thrust into the church setting. My dad was always ahead of the times in the way that churches worship. He was always doing the contemporary style. He was the first one to kind of get a good sound system in the church and forced me to use a microphone. I refused for a long time, and he kept saying, "No one can hear you. Use the mic." So it was always kind of pushed me towards that. And I remember my freshman year of college, my parents were going to be gone for a week. And he came to me and he said, "I want you to put some songs together and give a little message for the service on Sunday." And I, at that point, only knew maybe one song. And so I said, okay. And I quickly learned 4 or 5 songs, praise songs, a couple Don Francisco songs. And I did that, and it was an amazing experience for me. And I gradually started to write music, and as I started to do this more and more in my dad's church, and then I started to branch out and do it in other special churches that we knew, I would start to take one of those other songs out and add one of mine in, and it just started to build. And I do remember the first concert I planned, and I had to not use all of the songs I've written because it was going to be too long. And that was a big moment for me. I was like, oh, that's cool. I actually have a catalog.
A repertoire, yes.
So to get to your question, I avoided work as much as possible. And I decided that like what I wanted to do was see if something like this could work as a career, where I could go out to churches and give my story and sing and help churches worship in a way that maybe some aren't used to. And so the summer before my senior year of college, I planned a tour down the East Coast. It was a 6-week tour, and slept in my car the whole time and bopped around to different churches and sang. And I don't think I was any good at all. They were super gracious, but survived all of that with free will offerings and came back realizing that this is something that I could do. I could hone and I could make it work. So that was my focus, and from that point on, I married my wife right out of college, where we went, Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, and started my career then. I put together my first CD that year, and then just started calling churches and booking and going out and singing and doing all those things, and did that for 18 years, all over the country. My wife and I traveled together while we didn't have kids. We would kind of pick a part of the country that we were curious about, and I would set up a tour, and we'd go out and travel. I have sung in 43 states of the United States, and I was in the peak of my career. I was probably 110 churches a year, where I would go around and sing. And in the meanwhile, I was always, wherever home church we were, I would be the praise band director part-time.
Okay.
And always knew that at some point that would shift. Family and experience and where we were in life, I would need to be part-time traveling and more of a full-time job. And this job opened up unexpectedly, and it was an opportunity that I knew I needed to take. Even though I knew I would really miss the traveling, and I wasn't quite ready at the time to make that shift, I knew that this would be within a few years, and then the door would not be open. So I took that job and this job full-time, and honestly, I've never looked back. I do miss traveling. I do miss singing and sharing in a concert setting. The booking and being away from home, I do not miss. Mm-hmm. That is incredibly difficult. But being here has fulfilled all of my desires of worship, of performing, of playing with other musicians, of a community that's supportive, and I really want for nothing. I feel absolutely blessed to be here.
Well, and we feel blessed to have you, and I love sometimes the pastors, when we have the new member reception and new members introduce themselves at the different services, I'm always amazed, and I hope you're amazed and heartened by the number of people who say that one of the reasons that they were attracted to St. Luke's is because of the music program and just the high quality of the music and the opportunity for the traditional worship, for the contemporary worship, and just the level of the playing and the singing grupes of the musicians that are attracted to St. Luke's. It just sort of builds on itself. Right. So you've built quite a following for St. Luke's as well, which is a great thing for us and hopefully for you. Do you know how many songs you've written total now?
It's well into the hundreds, I know. I have 10 CDs, about 9 to 12 songs on each. And those are ones that were polished enough where I felt like they should be on a CD. I have a whole slew of others that I don't think I could even remember to play anymore, so maybe they don't count. But
I still think they count. I'm always curious for that very reason of people who, songwriters, the number of songs that they've written in totality and the number of songs they've performed.
Right.
I'm sure I would imagine it's
right.
a very different number.
Exactly.
So you talked about going to churches and being able to sort of tell your story and weave that in with music. And in a situation like that where you're sort of in control of the narrative, you can sort of take people on your journey when your faith was at its strongest, when your faith was at its weakest, right. And sort of correlate songs to those times. When you're on staff and there's a liturgical calendar and there's a sermon theme, there's a little less control over matching it with what you personally might be feeling and where you personally are in your faith. And I'm wondering if you can tell us how being on staff as the worship and music director, you can reconcile, you're able to reconcile some of those times. And for context, for the question, when I was in 8th grade, my uncle died unexpectedly and tragically. And my aunt, his wife, for several months, went to church every Sunday, but refused to take communion and refused to sing. And even at that time, I think I was able to understand that it was her way of saying, God, I still love you, and God, I know you still love me, but I am so mad that I can't even look at you right now. And I'm wondering, when you're in a role like you are, she was able to do that and do it discreetly and work through that. When you're in a role like you are, it's a lot harder to say, I'm not singing this week, I'm not gonna, I'm not gonna worship this week, as you have sort of the ebb and flow and the peaks and valleys of your own personal faith story. So talk to us about how that works. What is your touchstone? How do you find yourself able to worship and sort of reconcile when it doesn't match up for you in your own life?
That's a good question. It's something I watched my dad go through, obviously, and I think anybody in a role, a leadership role, or maybe any job, you do have to compartmentalize. And my personal faith life and worship is, I don't know if I would say rarely, but is not the primary journey is not seen on this stage here. There's a lot going on in my mind when I'm here worshiping. My job, I feel, is to eliminate the barriers for others to experience that. In order to eliminate those barriers, there's a lot going on. So in the midst of one song, I'll be thinking about the microphones, if they're working, the other musicians, what they're playing, what I'm playing. If the PowerPoint is on the right slide, how can I quickly switch it on my iPad without missing a chord? What's coming up immediately afterward? Many times, that's not where to answer the question, where my faith journey and movement is at its best. Mine comes later, in preparation of getting that all together, in practicing through those things, of oftentimes no music at all. Just being alone. I like to be alone. That energizes me.
And how does your faith inform, since it sort of spills into your professional life, your parenting, your friendships, how do you incorporate your faith when you're not here and planning worship? How does your faith inform the rest of your life?
God is present in my life always. I have never felt completely alone, even when I feel alone, if that makes sense. I believe that God is everywhere, is in everything. We are made up of all that God is, so it's impossible to be separated from that. So every decision I make, every step I take, He's there. And even when I don't know that that's happening, I can't get away from it. And Jen and I have always believed that there is not one correct path. There's a whole bunch. Some are going to be easier than others, but God is on every single one of them. And we can't really make a bad choice. That no matter what path we're on, He's going to be there. Our life is going to move in a direction, and and we won't be alone. So that's always been our thought when we think about where do we go, what do we do, what house to buy, whatever. It's not a sit down and pray for wisdom. It's, I'm going to make this decision. I know that God is there in that decision. And that's how I manage my life, trusting that I am not alone in that decision. When I decide what music to pick or what to do here, it's a decision that I don't have to pray about and wait for inspiration. I make the decision. I'm not alone in that decision. And so my faith and my trust and belief in God is just ever present in what I do.
And when you talk about making a decision or choosing a path, take us back to roughly 4 years ago or so. St. Luke's has the 4 services on Sunday morning, and my understanding, I think it predates me, but there was some playing around with a midweek service, a Saturday night service. But for a long time, when I first came, there was the 4 Sunday morning services, which kind of met different needs for timing and style. And I think sort of accidentally, because Oasis went virtual, people associate my face with Oasis, maybe not realizing that 4 years ago, this was probably one of those decisions that you made, thinking, what else? Well, my question is, what question were you answering? Or was there a call? Was there a need for you, for the congregation? What were you thinking about, and what was your prayer when you thought, you know what we could really use is this thing that we now call Oasis? Well, tell us about how that journey.
Well, yeah, those who have been to our services on Sunday morning know we call it a vibrant Lutheran worship, and it moves along. We don't have a lot of time. Our services are shorter. There's a lot of reasons for that, one of them being our parking lot's not very big, so we got to get people in and out. We have a lot of people with a smaller sanctuary, so we need to have a lot of services. We don't want to go over the noon hour, so we need to figure out a way to move things along and still keep the body of the service, those elements that are important. But what that does then is eliminates some of the stillness in a worship service and the contemplation of a service. And for me, that was always difficult, especially as I was talking about earlier about all the stuff going in my mind. It's one thing after another, moving along, and boom, the service is over, and then into the next one. And I was missing something. And I know I'm not the only one, that in their life there needs to be a moment of stillness. And we were always talking about it. Where do we add a service if we need it? And Wednesday night, we call it church night, because we have confirmation and classes and dinner and practices and all that stuff. And so we talked about it as a program staff about what we can do. And honestly, it was formed more in a selfish way than thinking of others.
Okay, say more.
I needed it. I needed that space to worship myself. And I needed a place where I could listen to David and Malia play every week. So the way that we designed it was darker, more space of stillness, music that is just playing so that people can meditate on their life and their day, quiet so they can breathe. One of the best comments I heard was 3 or 4 weeks into it, a member came up and said, I was sitting there in Oasis and I realized that was the first time today that I stopped and breathed. And I thought that's exactly what it is. People need that oasis to get to and just let things go and feel in a different way. And it's more of a prayer half hour than a service in my mind. And we didn't want to burden the pastors with putting together a whole nother service. And so we had the idea, let's invite members share their stories. And that actually turned out even better because everyone has such an amazing story and such a wonderful thing to tell. And we realize we're all in this together. So it originated out of a selfishness for my own worship. And I'm so glad that it's continued. I'm so glad that you took the lead on this because you've really done a wonderful job and this format. So
thank you.
I'm excited for getting back live again
Yes.
and what we can do. It's just a neat experience.
Well, and I love that you said, to hear members' stories, and I think there's a misconception that, or some people who are either struggling with their faith or maybe came to a faith later in life don't have a story to share. And we all have a story to share. And that's what I have personally loved too, is inviting someone or somebody coming to me and saying, I was thinking about this, what do you think? I don't know. And it always ends up being something that somebody needed to hear that night because we
Exactly.
all have a story. And it doesn't have to be punctuated with angel singing and some big breakthrough. It is the everyday things and places that we see God and find God that resonates with everyone.
Exactly. Everyone has that journey and over again that discovery of what their faith is. Mm-hmm. And we need to share that with each other because that's how we grow. That's how we know that we're not on this journey alone.
Absolutely. That somebody else is going through the same thing.
Yeah.
So I put out a call to the St. Luke's Community Facebook page telling them that you and I were going to be chatting today and asking if they had any burning questions they wanted to make sure that I asked. And here are a few of them. So this comes from Anne-Marie Weber, who I do need to give context to. She plays the flute. She sings in the choir and plays the flute often to either solos or accompanying a group. And so her question is this: who is your favorite instrumentalist at church and why is it the flautist? And then she asks, okay, really? Each week the music enhances the week's message in a magnificent way. How do you plan the hymns and special music so that they weave a parallel story to the readings and sermon? What goes into your planning?
Yeah, that's not a solo job. We have a worship group that's made up of the two pastors, me, Jay, Ted, and we get the stuff early of what the pastors want to preach about and what the readings are. They put together the proclamation of praise, the meat of the service, and so you can see the theme pretty easily once you talk to them and read the lessons. And from that point, then I go back and just try and find music that fits that. And amazingly, it's even songs that I don't expect to fit oftentimes do. And I don't know how that works out. But I feel like God is involved in some of that. And praise songs, I think, are so broad most of the time. They almost fit with anything. And so that's not as hard. And hymnal is really broken down into topics and what you can do. And we have Ted Reinke, who's a walking encyclopedia, that you ask him, like, I need a hymn about this, and he says, gives you one. So he's amazing to pull songs out and what to sing and themes. And it's the whole community kind of just works on trying to weave this concept through. The musicians that I have come in that do special music, I primarily just leave it up to them of what they want to do, and a lot of times it fits. Mm-hmm. It's a community. It's working with this team, and it's what's so remarkable about this place is that we are on the same page and the same spirit kind of involved in what we want to do here and what we want to help people discover. So
nice.
That's it.
All right. Next question. How has the experience of COVID changed I'm assuming he means St. Luke's, changed our approach to music ministry, especially regarding congregation participation?
It's difficult. I mentioned earlier that I feed off of the voices of the congregation. So for a year now, I've been trying to feed off of a camera.
How's that going?
Not the great
great,
sometimes. After 74 takes, I finally get one that maybe will work. No. As you know, because you sing and you record all the time. It's been hard to figure out what we can do, and we're trying to make sure people stay as safe as possible. We're trying to follow CDC guidelines and what to do with choirs and what to do with singing, and we are erring on the side of safety with a lot of that. We haven't been able to have our group practices, choirs and praise band. What I've done is, when Doug came on board in the summer, we decided at that point that this is our online worship and music is going to continue. And so in that process, we're going to continue to offer that kind of music presentation. We'll try and do some live recording as we get going a little more and do those things. But in terms of online worship, you're still going to see high quality music and worship. In person, I think eventually, obviously, we will be back singing together. And I hear people singing a little bit when we're singing on Sundays now and humming. But we're going to try, I put the words up, and try to still create a sense of worship, even though we're not all singing together. And that's not easy. But right now, I think it's essential, but that's not permanent. That is a means to safety right now, with every ounce of me waiting for that moment when we can say no masks, no restrictions, sings your heart out,
right.
And even playing with the praise band and all of that wonderful stuff.
Right. Let's see. Where is your favorite place to play your guitar? I didn't think this would be the stumper. Of all of them, I didn't think this one would stump you.
I like to be in this church at like 11 at night.
Oh, that's right. You're a night owl, aren't you?
And nobody around. And I'll just turn on maybe one spotlight or something. And then.
Do you play hymns? Do you play your own music? What do you play? Whatever feels right.
Whatever feels right. Yeah. Sometimes it's just one thing over and over again. Just that. Well, sometimes you hear the reverb and the echo, and it just sounds right, and you just hear the space. So, music is that for me. So it's those moments that that's it.
Best high school sports memory?
Oh, man. Probably my senior year track. Our track team won the team state championship. And it was a 3-day affair. I was running the 100, the 200, the 400, and the 1600 relay. And the way that they do it in Colorado is there's prelim, semifinal, and finals for each of those races. So by the end of that 3 days, I could hardly walk. And to sit, we got in kind of a rows, and they let me hold the trophy in the middle, and I was kneeling, and they took our picture. And that was an amazing moment.
Good stuff. Have you shown your kids the picture?
Yeah,
Do you still have the picture?
They don't care.
They don't care.
They don't believe it. Yeah.
You didn't exist before they came. I mean, really. All right. David Bell, who plays bass in the praise band, wants to know, when you get your guitar humidor, can he keep his cigars in it?
No.
Oh, shot down, Dave Bell. How do you do that you have a lot of really, really nice guitars, and we were out in below zero weather for Christmas Eve, and it was hot as blazes last summer when we tried to do some outdoor stuff. So seriously, short of a humidor, how do you keep your instrument tuned and safe and all of that in sort of extreme weather?
I have bought one expensive guitar, and I splurged on it, and I got it, and it cracked. And I said to my wife, you know what, I can't buy expensive guitars because of that, especially when I was traveling.
Yeah.
I'd have to leave my instrument in my truck for a day when it was hot in there and cold, and it just, to have an expensive guitar to worry about was just a nightmare.
Stressful. Yeah.
Stressful. So I found it's not cheap, but a good middle ground guitar that you'll see me playing with every Sunday, that I know if that cracks or breaks, I'll just buy another one, and I don't worry about it.
Right. It won't be the heartbreak.
It's a working guitar. Yeah. I love the way it sounds. And surprisingly, at Christmas Eve, 10 hours in 0 to -5 weather, and that guitar did not crack. It still works. I couldn't believe it. I was unfortunately thinking I was going to have to buy a new one.
Right. For Christmas, I would like.
Yes, yeah, this cracked. Yeah. But no, it held up. I should actually write a letter to the company and say, you guys have an amazing guitar.
Yeah,
So,
send a picture, yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I don't go expensive. So I don't have a lot of expensive guitars.
So you don't really need a humor. You will not be getting a humidor. Okay.
No, it's too much effort.
All right. What song do you, I love the two questions together. What song do you love for the lyrics, and what song do you love for the musicality?
I'll lean on my own songs, I think.
Okay.
I don't know that I could pull it from a praise song or a hymn. But lyric-wise, it would be the song Grace from my CD, Grace to Grace. And it's a very specific story about when I traveled out to the ocean looking for myself and my faith. And if you took all of my songs really and listened to all of them, you would kind of see that same theme throughout. They're all about the journey of discovery, and that song especially hit me because that was such an emotional moment in my life. So Grace for the lyrics.
Okay.
I love the music of that too, but probably the music song would be one called "One Came Back," and that's just a guitar solo. My dad loved it. And I love the way it feels when I play it. It just is one of those songs I could play it indefinitely. It just feels right.
Is it based on I think I've heard you play that, and is it based on the one who came back to say thank you for
yes.
Was it the healing of the lepers? Yeah. All right. Well, you may have answered this earlier. By the time you get to the third service on a Sunday, pre-COVID, do you ever stop and think, wait, did we sing this verse already?
Yeah. I don't know if people notice, but I sing the wrong verse a lot.
No.
And it's always, I'll be singing away, and then I'll suddenly hear other people singing something different, and I'll be like, oh, and then I'll jump back, and then it's constantly happening to me. So I rely on everybody else to remind me.
There you go.
Where we're at in the song.
It makes you human. It's okay. It's all right. We gotcha. So, who is one of your favorite influences? You mentioned, I'm not going to come up with the right name right now, but
Don Francisco was as a kid, yeah.
Okay. Any other influences for the music that you write?
Yeah, any kind of singer-songwriter I love. Leo Kottke was one I've listened to my whole life, guitar player. Really, I gravitate towards guitar players more than anything. Let's see, who else is there? Primarily, those are the two. Dougie MacLean, I don't know if you heard him. He's from Scotland, actually. Mumford & Sons.
Oh.
I really enjoyed them. I like rhythmic, a lot of rhythm groups. But name-wise, those are probably the top three that I've always really gravitated towards and listened to.
Felt inspired by.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. If you can visit any location on the planet at any time in history, where would you go? And in what era? So where and when would you go if you could time travel, essentially?
If I would be welcomed there. I always was fascinated by like the Native Americans, their life. It seems amazing in their heyday, probably the way that they lived as a community in nature with horses. And I think that would be really cool to be a part of that life. The spiritual aspect of what they, how they live their lives just really appeals to me. So maybe that would be it. I don't know when that would be or where, but maybe that.
All right. So the last two come from St. Luke's very own Jay Keel, who is, for those of you who may not know, he's our youth minister, youth director. What's his title
Director
these days?
of Youth, Family, and Children.
Director of Youth, Family, and Children. Jay,
Yes.
we just call him, he's just Jay.
He's just Jay, and I don't answer any questions of Jay's.
He's just out. Well, I feel like every week people are able to see you either singing up front or back working on the mics and always running around at all the different services, but not everybody gets the actual chance to visit with you. So I'm really glad that you took the time to chat with us today, and thank you.
Thanks, Deanna.